everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank. With Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. The regular season finale for North Dakota State lies ahead as South Dakota will come to the Fargo Dome on Senior Day. It's Harvest Bowl Day, and it's the final day of the regular season. So much on the line. It's my favorite day of the year. I am a bit crestfallen because it is the final day. I feel like we just started. Jeff, I'm speaking personally about our broadcast. We've just started this. We were talking for 2 months about the Albany game, and now we're done.
Let's take a holistic look at this season, because we were coming off a spring season of COVID interruptions and just a train wreck of a several-month period.
Yep.
And coming in August, we weren't sure if that would rear its ugly head, if there were going to be vaccination problems, if there were going to be testing problems, if there were going to be
cancellations.
Yes, yep. And it hasn't happened. So let's be thankful. With Thanksgiving not far off, let's be thankful we've gotten to this point where the season hasn't been interrupted like it was last year. I think that's a big deal. I think it's something we forget about.
You're dead on, because I thought we may have more of that than we did, and I'm glad we did.
I'm
glad we didn't. I really am, and that's a good point to bring up to start, because I think, at least I was of the mindset, we may be in the same boat that we were in the spring, and the fact that we only had a handful of cancellations, everybody played all their games, that's pretty good.
And the handful of cancellations came early. There's a couple non-conference games. St. Thomas had one canceled, actually their season opener.
Yep.
It was a big deal in August. It was a big story because the Valley came out and said, if you cancel, it will be a forfeit. It will be no more of this no contest stuff. It's time to move forward and play.
And, boy, what do we have here for a game? And I mentioned this to you on Monday on my show, where when you looked at the home schedule, you're like, well, Northern Iowa's here. That'll be a good one. Albany, we weren't sure. You knew Valpo was going to go the way it was. You knew Indiana State was likely going to go the way it was. Missouri State turned out to be a great game, but you weren't sure about that.
And a good team.
And South Dakota, you're like, well, they're and now this is going to turn out it could be a great game.
It's a title game.
Yeah.
It is a Missouri Valley football title game. The students have responded.
They have.
When's the last time they took all their tickets in November? I mean, I don't expect you to know that, but it feels like it's been a long time.
South Dakota here, I think we've dubbed it now the Vermiracle. Are you all right with that? The Vermiracle.
That's pretty good.
After what happened last Saturday as the Coyotes beat the Jackrabbits with a Hail Mary to Jeremiah Webb in the end zone. And now here's USD, and we have talked about USD quite a bit here on this podcast. You've been on them right after the Kansas game when they lost to KU, saying they might be the most improved team in the Valley.
And now they are the most improved team. It's not May anymore. There's no question.
7 wins. They're going to the postseason, I think, regardless of what happens tomorrow at the Dome.
I do. I agree. Yep, they're in. They are in.
And it's been mostly on defense. That's the thing, where NDSU has been able to do what it wanted running the football in previous games against South Dakota. The Coyotes are 12th in the country in rush defense.
And more important, they're 12th in the country in scoring defense, and that's really where it counts, giving up an average of 17.4 points a game. When you're a losing team, especially in the Valley, you give up a boatload of points. It's just a common denominator you see with losing teams is they can't stop anybody.
And South Dakota has done that against the Bison. They've given up a boatload of points.
700 yards in 2019.
Yep.
NDSU had 700 yards of total offense. And they could have had 900 if it was a game.
If they wanted to keep pushing it, they probably could have. There's no doubt on that. And you think of the game in 2018 in Vermilion, Trey Lance got in that game. That game was over early on in that one. 2017 here wasn't much of a. Strevler was the one-man show and had USD going early on, but after that, the Bison took him out of that game.
Trey Lance in 2018 is when he had one play.
Yep.
Fumbled the ball.
Right to him.
Picked it up and circumvented the defense left, right, and you went, okay, there's something there.
There is so much to discuss here. I want to touch on South Dakota a bit before we get into NDSU and then into what the playoff potential is. Bob Nielsen's a heck of a coach. I'm not breaking any news there, but he's going to get USD to the playoffs for a second time in 5 years. I think that's noteworthy, Jeff. It's going to come across as me downplaying Vermilion, but it's Vermilion. It's not Fargo. It's not Carbondale. It's not Springfield. That is hard to get to to get players to come there.
They've gotten better facilities, though.
They have.
That's a big selling point. You bring recruits into the Dakota Dome now, and it's got some aesthetic value. It's got curb appeal when you walk in.
I wish we could have seen it in action when we were down there last year.
Oh, we did with our no-game show.
It looks great down there. You're absolutely right. They got a turf practice field outside. They've spent some money. David Herbster's done that.
And the results are you have a playoff team. It's a program that cares, and it's investing in football, and that is the very core of the problem of the FCS right now as a whole.
Yes.
Just not enough programs investing in football. You're seeing it now up and down the valley, with the exception of Indiana State. I do believe everybody else has done something or investing. Western. Yeah, they did their renovation. It's too far in the past now when they did something to Hanson Field.
And they put new turf down there.
But nobody cares. Nobody goes.
And they got to find a head coach here over the next little bit too. With signing day approaching, you'd think that would be something high priority for them.
Oh man, that sets them behind. Wow.
And Jared Elliott's coaching this tomorrow in his final game, and then hit the bricks after that. So I'm intrigued with USD. We heard it a few years ago that USD was starting to win the recruiting battles against SDSU, but it wasn't playing out that way. But now, Coyotes have beaten the Jacks twice in a row.
They have a quarterback. Let's start right there.
Carson Camp is good.
They have a quarterback. They have a guy under center. They have a leader there. He's actually a redshirt freshman considered, right? Or a true freshman.
This
is his first year.
He's a freshman.
He's a freshman.
Still. Yes. The best way to.
God, we are good. Tomorrow's going to be.
We'll get into that in a second, but yes, he is a freshman.
So they have a good defense. You have a good quarterback. They've settled on their up and down, north-south running back. A guy that's just. It's what NDSU did last week at Youngstown, better than they have all year, is one cut and go. No more of this stretch dancing around stuff.
Yeah.
Get some running attacks and go right at it.
Well, they had a talented freshman, Shamari Lawrence, who was really running well early. He got hurt in the Missouri State game, is done for the season. Tice, the kid from Kansas, who's just been, he ran hard that opening game and has done that the entire season for USD. Caleb Vander Esch has been there for a while at wide receiver. Obviously, you're now going to watch Jeremiah Webb for what he did in the game on Saturday against
Carter
South Dakota
Bell
State.
is the go-to receiver.
Yep, he's another guy who catches a lot of passes. Camp is we talked about him in the Illinois State game. Bloomington kid, right underneath Brock Spack's nose, and ends up going to Vermilion.
And here are the stats, completions percentage and all that. Here are the stats that matter with Carson Camp. 15 touchdown passes against only 3 interceptions. That's a very good ratio.
No doubt.
And that's why Cam Miller's your quarterback right now. 10 TDs and 2 interceptions.
So tomorrow is senior day, and I put senior with an asterisk next to it because it's a really odd present. It's a great day. It's one of my favorites to see the guys be individually recognized, but there obviously are some decisions to be made for this senior class about either using an extra year of eligibility or deciding to move on. Now, before we get into this, there are 3 guys that cannot. Michael Beto, Braden Thomas, and Cordell Volson.
Their clock is done.
This is it for them whenever the Bison season is done. Cordell on his 6th year, Thomas in his 6th year, as is Beto. Both of them transfers from Mankato to come to NDSU. After that, then it gets into a really gray area on who decides to come back and who decides to leave. Costner Ching, you found out earlier in the season that this was going to be it. 5-year guy who redshirted his first year.
5-year guy battling in the trenches. Time to move on.
Jackson Hankey told me earlier in the season, another 5-year guy, another one who's got a lot of hits on his body, ready to move on. Mason Hofstad, 5-year guy, went through a really serious injury, ready to be done with his football career. Logan McCormick, 5-year guy, who also told me he played as a true freshman, then redshirted, ready to be another guy who's had a ton of hits on his body.
Okay, well, that we know.
Jake Reinholz, 5-year guy. Now, he was hurt for a majority of 2019, and I asked him this week about it. He said, you know what? I'm just ready. I'm ready for something else. Shanley kicker.
Well, I remember when I was my 5th year in college, I had to actually go. I had to go 5.
As did I.
Plus a little bit, and you're just ready to be done mentally. I was like, okay. You just felt old. I know it sounds stupid, but nope. you did. I did. Around my fraternity house, I was like the elder statesman, and it's time to move on. And
the last one is Christian Watson, obviously,
NFL.
In his 5th year, and he's moving on
to
the National Football League. Okay, so now, Jeff, we're left with the other seniors, and these are all identified as seniors on the Bison roster. I want to go through these, and then we can explain a little bit from there. Dawson Weber, we know, is coming back. Dawson's a fifth-year guy, so he decided he wants to play another year of football. Jasir Cox will be his fifth year next year. Remember, Jasir played as a true freshman in that title team in 2018 with his brother, and he's decided he's going to use his fifth year. Destin Talbert played as a true freshman. Phoenix Sproles played as a true freshman. So those guys, it makes sense.
They
That's
probably have
their
some
fifth
school
year,
left. Yeah, they probably have some schooling left.
Here's a guy that surprised me, Michael Tutsi. Now, Tutsi's in his fifth year now. I was floored by that one.
I was not. That guy loves football. Son of a football coach. He just can't get enough of the game. Probably not an NFL guy, a little small for that spot. I just think he loves the game too much to give it up. He's that kind of guy.
So those four guys, Cox, Talbert, Sproles, Tutsi, holy cow.
That's pretty good.
Next guy, James Kaiser. Kaiser played as a true freshman, so he'll be back for a fifth year. Nash Jensen is in his fifth year now as a starter. He's going to be back for a sixth year. That's a big deal up front. Cody Mauk, who's the starting left tackle, will come back for a sixth year. Luke Salento, the transfer, will be back for another year. Then it gets interesting, Jeff, with the tight ends. Josh Babbage and Noah Gindorf. Our colleague Mike McFeely reported yesterday that Babbage initially was going to come back. Now it looks like he's moving on.
Now, we think.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll know more. And we won't know until they're introduced to the helmet. But is Noah Gindorf now?
Well, so Gindorf, we had led to believe, was moving on. Now does he stay? Because if you get one of those guys back
as the feature tight end,
holy cow,
and maybe up your stock for pro potential, would that make a difference one more year coming back in your pro potential?
Look at Pitt quarterback Kenny Pickett. I would say absolutely. Pickett's one of the favorites for the Heisman and going to be a high draft pick.
Because
so I say yes.
If one, either Babbage or Gindorf, if one comes back, and I don't think Babbage is now, is my understanding. Yeah. If Gindorf, for whatever reason, would come back now, he stands to be the featured guy, right?
Yes. Yes. For the first time in his collegiate career, by the way.
Yeah, he's always been sharing the carries,
yeah.
sharing the load, sharing the receptions.
Lane Tucker, I asked point blank last week, and he said 90% I'm probably done.
I think they're trying to convince him.
Now, Matt Entz is working on him to see if he can stay. But from what Lane told me, he was about 90% he was ready to be done. McCormick, we know, is done. Ching, we know, is done. Barty Ogbu is another interesting story, but he has visa issues with his status. So it looks like he's probably done after this season. The last one is another biggie. Spencer Wagee, which he's told both of us after the injury, he's going to come back next season.
That's a lot of experience coming back.
That's 10 starters.
And a lot of teams had those guys coming back this year. Southern Illinois had 16 six-year seniors coming back this year. I think South Dakota State had a bunch of 5, 6-year guys coming back. NDSU really didn't this year, but they are next year.
Oh, my gosh.
So are they just delaying their
domination,
seniority status a year?
And that's the interesting thing. It's not just this year. We're going to do this same conversation next year, the year after that, and the year after that with some guys. I don't know how they're going to do this in compliance. I really have no idea how to keep it straight on what year you are. You know what I mean? And it's not just NDSU. It's everybody that's going to have to go through this.
We can only guess. Yeah, it's about your academics. It's about your timeline of graduation. It's about your health.
Right, and it's about
so many factors.
Right. I mean, you look at the guys who left after the fall. Quinn Allo, Matt Biegler, Carson Schuning. They all had life things waiting for them.
And do not forget about this. Are you a walk-on? Do you have to pay your way?
Correct.
College isn't cheap. That's $20,000.
Yeah.
That's us.
I would tell you, and I didn't play football, I had to go an extra year because of grades. And I was ready to be done at the end of my fifth year.
I have a Division II college baseball player who could come back next year. Now, not a full scholarship guy.
What's he doing? Has he made up his mind yet?
Well,
his dad made up his mind for him.
He's going to graduate. And I don't own the form, okay? Are you going to spend several thousand to play baseball?
Hey, that new book is out. We can start getting that going here, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and it's also.
But that's a huge factor in any decision.
See, baseball is different because baseball you can play with your buddies.
And that's next spring, by the way.
Football you can't.
You have to go the full year next spring to come back in the fall. Then you can graduate.
We're talking the spring of 23. That's a long ways from now.
So I will amend what I said. In football, you can cut it in half and just go one more semester.
Right.
Big difference.
It's fascinating to see how this is going to play out, not only with NDSU, but the other Valley teams as well, about who's going to use the extra year and who's not. But tomorrow we'll be keeping our eye on the 81 and 87. And if they're both announced, then you know. And NDSU is not lacking at the tight end position. They really like Travis Yonke there.
But it puts more importance maybe on Gabe Lloyd coming back.
Gabe Lloyd, who's out there, who did not play this whole season. Joe Stuffle has played. They really like him at tight end. So we'll see.
Bison have tight. They'll find tight ends.
They always do. Running backs and tight ends, they grow on trees for NDSU. All right, before we get to pick them, what is the committee going to do this weekend that's going to make you go crazy? What do you think? Is it seeding? Boy. Is it seeding or a team getting in that shouldn't get in? I'll go after you. I know what I'm going to pick.
It's going to be seeding.
Yes.
No question.
Yep.
No question. Sam Houston, are they rewarded with a weak schedule? They've beaten nobody. They've beaten one team who was ranked, and that was Central Arkansas, who was 25th at the time. That's their best win. A victory over a team that was one time number 25. That's it.
You know what would be great? If the committee flipped everything on its head and put them fourth. They won't do that, but wouldn't that be setting a mark, setting a statement to the rest of the FCS? You can't play nobody and be rewarded with it. They won't do that, but that would be a heck of a statement to send.
And, which is why I think the Valley's are going to get 6 teams in if they go by that philosophy.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm out there by myself on this. I've not seen any other people that do bracketology in the FCS that have 6 Valley teams in. They have 3 SoCon teams in, which I think is crazy.
No,
I really do. Mercer, who's only going to have 6 Division I wins. VMI, Chattanooga. The rest of the FCS did not help itself out. I don't believe they're going to get 3.
The CAA is just down this year. Yep. It's flat out down.
CAA will get 3. I'm confident that Rhode Island will be the 3rd team, joining Villanova and James Madison.
And they probably should. CAA should get 3 teams.
How about this conversation then? The Big Sky getting 4 seeded teams.
Now, I don't know about that.
Oh, you're pumping the brakes on that.
That's a lot.
Because
4 out of the 8, half seeded teams.
If Montana wins, they have to be seeded. Montana State should still be a seed.
Beat University of Washington.
Eastern Washington would still be a seed. And depending on how Sac State does with Davis, Sac State would be a seed. I think they got 4 a couple years ago. The committee did it 2 years ago. They seeded 4 Big Sky teams. It would not surprise me if they did it again.
And keep in mind, if the Valley gets 6 teams, 3 will have to be on one side of the bracket, 3 on the other.
Theoretically.
Well, that was a stipulation.
I know. I hope they follow that principle, that they keep to that. But yes, which 3 are on which side is the interesting point on that. One of the South Dakota schools will be paired up with NDSU.
Yes.
It's which one is what's going to be interesting. And that's why that game in Brookings tomorrow is all the more intriguing. One last point on the seeds. I think Missouri State should be seeded. 8-3. FBS loss, not supposed to hurt you. Lost by...
And a pretty good quality
It's Oklahoma State, who's going to win the Big 12.
FBS loss.
They lost by 4 to the Bison. The Youngstown loss kills them. So they have 1 really bad loss and 2 quality losses. You on board with Mo State getting a seed?
I'm on board.
Really?
Yes.
All right. I didn't know if you would be there. They're the 2nd best team in the best conference. They need to be seeded. That's my rationalization on Mo State getting a seed.
They'll end up they're 6-2 in the Valley.
Right, they're done with Valley games. They play Dixie State tomorrow.
Yeah, be 8-3 overall.
Yes,
that's a pretty good resume.
I think so. I think they need to be there. South Dakota State have anything to worry about tomorrow?
A little bit. If they lose,
a little bit. If the Jacks lose, they would be 6-5. Or no, they'd be 7-4. 6-4 in the eyes of the committee.
A great win at Colorado State.
Yep, great win over the Bison.
But what are their wins after that? That's the only quality win.
They beat Lindenwood, who's not a Division I team. They beat Indiana State. They beat Western Illinois. They beat Youngstown State.
But if Northern Iowa and South Dakota State have the same record, Northern Iowa won the head-to-head.
Here's the thing. SDSU would be 6-4 in the eyes of the committee. UNI would be 6-5. But as you just said, UNI would have the head-to-head. That has to mean something, doesn't it?
UNI beat Sac State. UNI has more quality wins.
They do. UNI beat Southern Illinois as well. That's why the one that hurts them is South Dakota boat raced UNI in Cedar Falls earlier this year.
Well, I think South Dakota State's going to beat UND, but don't underestimate UND and the way it's been playing lately.
Yeah, they've won 2 games that have come back and beat Illinois State and Youngstown. They're going to come in and play a hard game tomorrow. I know that with Bubba's team, they'll play a fierce game tomorrow.
If UND wins, the Jacks will be playing with fire. You have to admit that.
There's no doubt. Absolutely. They'll be sweating it out. If UND wins, do they have a chance? Can they leapfrog?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Northern Iowa's resume keeps UND out, I would imagine. And then last night we have with Southeastern Louisiana, the 15th ranked team in the country, loses to Nichols 45-42, which just, again, reminds us how many teams actually have a chance to win this thing. 6? I was at 6 a couple weeks ago. Is that too many?
Yes.
How many?
3.
Wow.
4.
What are your 3?
NDSU, James Madison, just based on reputation alone.
Okay.
I think Sam, I would say, has a chance.
Montana State?
I don't know. I don't know if they have the offense to make it all the way through.
I would say NDSU, Sam, James Madison. I think South Dakota State, if they get their act together, could. They could go on a run like we've seen Sam do, play on the opening weekend and make it all the way to the semifinals. That wouldn't surprise me.
That's quite the run, though.
Maybe Montana State. Those would be my 5. I'm not disagreeing with you, though. It's same old, like we do every year.
Montana State, I'd like to see them, to be a national title threat, put up like 28 or 31 on Montana.
In Missoula.
Yeah. That makes you a national title threat.
Shall we do some picks here before we wrap it up? Let's go through here on this final week of the regular season with some games meaning a ton. Let's start in the Valley with that game we were just talking about. 2 o'clock tomorrow in Brookings, UND at South Dakota State.
South Dakota State needs to put the miracle behind them.
Yes.
But I think they'll do it at home. I think they know the playoff implications here. And UND is just, they're good, but they're not good enough to win in this situation.
Yeah, it's an interesting year for Bubba's team, who they lost close to the Bison, lost close to Mo State, lost close to SIU, but just still lost the games. I think SDSU plays pretty aggressive tomorrow, and they win that one. Final game for Jared Elliott at Western Illinois. They're at Northern Iowa tomorrow.
Northern Iowa, how do you
I know, it's a lame duck situation there. I think Northern Iowa wins big, actually, in that one tomorrow.
And Northern Iowa knows its playoff life is at stake.
Youngstown State goes to SIU. Do they have any chance at a seed? I don't think so, because they lost to Missouri State.
Too many losses?
Yeah,
too many losses. Youngstown State just looked pathetic to me last week.
Yeah, I don't know where Doug Phillips goes with that team right now.
Just so far to go.
Yep. SIU wins there. Indiana State and Illinois State, each team with 4 wins. I don't know what to make of either program here.
Well, we didn't see Indiana State really at its best.
And Illinois State, we certainly didn't see it at its best either. And they went and beat Northern Iowa and South Dakota after we saw them play.
I just like Illinois State. For them to, they've had a win or two that they snuck up on people a little bit
this year. They've done that. Yeah, I think Illinois State wins tomorrow in its regular season finale. Villanova and Delaware. That is a rivalry game. Is there any chance the Fighting Blue Hens can knock off Nova tomorrow?
Didn't I make this stat early in the year? They've won 6 in a row against Villanova, correct? Delaware has beaten Villanova 6 in a row.
You're all about streak busting this week. I know where you're going here.
So that can't go on. I'm taking Villanova.
I have to save my pick for tomorrow on this
one. All right, okay. Just forget it.
On our pregame show. We'll wrap it up with the Brawl of the Wild game. Montana State.
Same thing.
Streak busting tomorrow, huh?
Too hard to win 5 in a row in this series. I'm taking the Grizzlies.
God, that's going to be a great atmosphere.
Got their quarterback
tomorrow.
back.
Yep, Cam Humphrey is back. For Montana. Vigs is going to they're going to be fired up for this game. I like Montana State. I think they're going to go in there and do it again.
Make sure you hold us tomorrow on the show.
I'm not waffling.
No waffling.
There's no flip-flopping here. I know exactly where we're going to go. Reminder, Bison Game Day, live 10 a.m. tomorrow morning on WDAY. Jeff, myself, and a cast of thousands to get you ready on the final day of the regular season. Game is at 2:30 with USD and NDSU. Then tomorrow night, Bison post-game show at Inforum.com. And then don't forget about 9 o'clock tomorrow, the Bracketology show is back. I can't wait for the
best show of the year.
Your intro.
Why have we not won? What's the Emmy? What's the version of in the broadcast business?
They could do Peabody. There's a bunch of awards we could win.
Why we haven't won them all is beyond me.
It is a mystery to me as well. But that's tomorrow night. And then if you want to join us Sunday morning for our selection show live chat at 11 a.m. at Inforum.com. The selection show is at 11:30 on ESPNU. That's always one of our favorite chats of the year. We normally get about 300 people on there that are as into it as we are, and that should be really interesting, Jeff, considering what we don't know heading into Sunday morning. That's going to be really fun.
I just feel like there's just a lot of curiosity going in on A, rankings, and B, or A, the field, and then B, seating.
Yep. And who's going to be going where? Especially, does the Valley get 6? Where are the Bison seated? Where is South Dakota State? All those questions will be answered on Sunday. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. For Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. That's the Kolpack and Izzo podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank.